Not every hand that reaches for the bread is ready to hold it. Some people come to that table healed. Some come carrying something they have no intention of putting down. And yet, you stood up when your row was called. You took the piece. You closed your eyes and you swallowed it. And you walked back to your seat without once asking what you had just agreed to in front of God. The argument you left unfinished on Saturday was still unfinished. The thing you promised to stop was still scheduled. Today I want to show you something the church rarely talks about because it sounds harsh until you hear what Paul actually said about it. We are going to walk through 6 things you should never do before you take communion. Not 6 reasons to stay in your seat. Not 6 tests of whether you are good enough to be there. 6 things to settle before you stand up so that the table finally does in you what God designed it to do. 1 Corinthians 11:28 says, "Everyone ought to examine themselves before they eat of the bread and drink from the cup." Most Christians read that as a check on personal sin, a quick private scan for anything unconfessed. But very few read what Paul says next. The danger, he writes, is eating without discerning the body. He is not only pointing at the body broken on the cross, he is pointing at the body sitting in the room. The examination he commanded was never only about you and God. Communion is not a reward for a clean week. It is a covenant meal, and covenants have terms. Let me be very clear before I say what I'm about to say. Nothing here is permission to keep another person from that table, or to keep yourself away from it. Unworthy was never the word Paul used about people. He used it about the manner. This is about how you come, not whether you may. 1. Never come to the table with a quarrel you have the power to end and have chosen not to end. The bread does not quietly cover what a phone call would have settled. Many believers assume the vertical comes first, that you settle it with God at the altar, and the repair with the person waits for a better month. Yet Jesus reversed that order in the plainest words he ever used about worship. I remember 2 men in one congregation who had not spoken in 4 years over a business arrangement neither would explain. They sat 6 rows apart. Both took communion every month without fail. Neither ever crossed the aisle. One of them died in the spring, and I watched the other take the cup at the next service. He told me afterwards that the bread had tasted like nothing at all. Matthew 5:23 and 24 are uncomfortably specific. If you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Here is what most believers overlook. He did not say if you have something against them. He said if they have something against you. The obligation begins with their grievance, not with yours. 2. Never come to the table while treating someone in that same room as beneath it. You cannot receive the body while quietly deciding which parts of it count. Most of us would never say such a thing out loud, so we assume we do not do it. But watch where people sit, whose name is remembered and whose is not, and which visitor is left standing alone with a cup. I once watched a church serve communion to a room that had quietly sorted itself. The families who built the building sat near the front. The newer people, most of them younger and visibly poorer, took the back 3 rows. Nobody was unkind that morning. It was simply understood which half of the room the church belonged to, and everyone ate from the same tray while understanding it. James 2:9 refuses to soften this. But if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. That is not language about poor manners. James calls it sin, and he sets it beside the law itself. The deeper lesson is this. A room can hold the right doctrine about the bread and still fail the examination in how it seats itself. 3. Never come to the table in a hurry you have not even noticed. What you arrive rushing through, you will receive nothing from. We tell ourselves that God is not counting minutes, and that is true. The danger was never a busy morning. It is that a sacred thing done at speed becomes a familiar thing, and a familiar thing eventually becomes an empty one, and nobody ever decides for that to happen. I knew a man who prepared the elements for 11 years. He arranged the trays and counted the cups. He told me once, without any drama, that somewhere in those years he had stopped noticing what was on the tray. It had become the setup. He had to teach himself to stand alone in that room for 30 seconds and look at it before anyone arrived. Ecclesiastes 5:1 says, "Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong." Notice the last part. They do not know. Here is what many believers overlook. Reverence is not an emotion you summon in the moment. It is the result of the 30 seconds you gave the thing beforehand. If this is landing, do 2 things before we go on. Subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you, and write in the comments, "I will not come to the table divided." Then stay with me, because the next 3 are the ones people almost never see in themselves. And the 6th is the one nobody warns you about at all. 4, never come to the table carrying something you have already decided you are going to keep. Confession is not a summary you deliver. It is a hand opening. Many sincere Christians believe that naming a thing honestly means they have dealt with it. So the same sentence is offered every month about the same thing, and it feels like humility because it is genuinely true. But there is a difference between admitting something and releasing it. And the whole of that difference shows up on Monday. I once sat with a woman who told me she had confessed the same resentment before communion for 6 years. She was not pretending. She meant every word each time she said it. Then one afternoon, she said something I have never forgotten. She had begun to suspect she was not confessing it in order to be free of it. She was confessing it in order to be allowed to keep it a little longer. Proverbs 28:13 draws the line cleanly. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. There are 2 verbs in that sentence, and we usually perform only the first. Mercy is attached to the second just as firmly as to the first. The deeper lesson is this: ask what you intend to do with the thing after the service ends. If the answer is nothing, you have not confessed it. You have described it. 5, never let that meal stand in for the obedience you refused all week. God has never accepted a ceremony as payment for a decision. This one hides best because it looks like devotion from every angle. The person is present, participates, is moved. There is nothing in the room to criticize. The problem is not in the room at all. It is in the thing God asked for on Tuesday that still has not been done. And the ritual has quietly become the substitute for doing it. I have watched a man take communion faithfully through 2 years in which he knew exactly what he was supposed to do about a situation in his own house. He never argued, and he never denied it. He simply kept doing what felt like obedience instead of what was obedience. When he finally acted, he told me the strangest part was discovering that he had not been avoiding God for 2 years. He had been visiting him regularly on purpose in order to avoid him. 1 Samuel 15:22 says it without decoration. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. Samuel is telling a king that the offering cannot be spent as currency for the thing he did not do. Here is what most believers overlook. A ceremony you are using to postpone obedience is not neutral. It is the most respectable way there is to tell God no. I need to be very careful and very clear here, because this last one is the easiest in this message to turn into a weapon against yourself. 6, and this is the one that matters most. Never come to the table quietly certain that you belong there more than the person sitting next to you. This is the most dangerous of the 6. It cannot be seen from outside, and it grows in exactly the soil the other 5 leave behind. You settle the quarrel, you confess the thing, you slow yourself down. And somewhere inside that good and necessary work, a small voice starts keeping a comparison, and the more carefully you prepare, the louder it gets. I have watched believers, and I am including myself here, take that bread while running a quiet inventory of the room. It is never dramatic. It is a passing thought about who has no business taking it, a note about a marriage everyone knows is failing, a flicker of relief that you are not that. Nothing about a person like that looks proud from the outside. It looks careful. It looks serious about God. It simply hardens, one reasonable comparison at a time. Luke 18:11 records the prayer word for word. God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. He is thanking God, and every fact in his prayer is accurate. Jesus says he went home unjustified, while the man who could not lift his eyes went home right with God. The deeper lesson is this: ask what you were thinking about in the seconds before you ate. If you were thinking about anyone else in that room, the examination Paul commanded had already gone wrong at the first step. I want to say something important before we close. This message is not about turning that table into an examination you are permanently failing. Communion was never a reward the qualified collect. It is a meal for people who cannot save themselves. And if only the settled and the whole could eat it, the first table would have been empty. Every one of these 6 can be dealt with in the minutes before the tray reaches your row. Not one of them is a reason to stay in your seat. If this message names something you have been carrying to that table for years, I want you to do one thing right now. Write in the comments, Lord, search me before I take the bread. And if you know someone who takes it every single month without ever stopping to ask what it costs, share this video with them today. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep growing together in biblical wisdom every single week. God bless you, my brother, my sister. Until next time.